Welcome back to Triple S Breakdowns. Today we're breaking down House of the Dragon Season 2 Episode 3 The Burning Mill. Let's begin. Point number 1, so the part of the tapestry depicting Aemond on Vhagar killing Lucerys on Arrax has now changed to a sleeping Jaehaerys who gets decapitated by golden thread, followed by a depiction of all the hanging ratcatchers. Point number 2, while it appears in the show that the Battle of the Burning Mill began because of a squabble between Bracken and Blackwood boys, with both Aaron Bracken and Davos Blackwood being show exclusive characters, in Fire and Blood, House Blackwood siding with Rhaenyra sent raiders into Bracken lands, and the Brackens siding with Aegon amassed an army to strike back. As the Bracken army camped by a riverside mill, they were attacked by the Blackwoods and they battled for hours as the mill burned. House Bracken was defeated, and when they fled back to their seat Stonehenge, they found it taken by an army led by Daemon, who by this point in the book already occupied Harrenhal, which is close to Stonehenge. And unlike in the show where Aegon thinks of the battle as a good thing, in Fire and Blood the Bracken's defeat at the Burning Mill and the loss of Stonehenge was one of the reasons why he removed Otto as Hand. Point number 3, speaking of the Hand, oh my god, why isn't Rhaenys Rhaenyra's Hand of the Queen? She's the only one who speaks any kind of sense to Rhaenyra. Point number 4, if hearing the name Grover Tully makes you think of the character Grover from the Muppets, that's intentional since George R.R. Martin named a number of House Tully after Muppets, with Grover, his grandson Elmo, and his great-grandsons Kermit and Oscar. Point number 5, with her dad, her last ally, gone, even Kristen is now able to undermine Alicent. I guess supporting her in the bedroom doesn't also extend to supporting her in the small council meetings. Point number 6, I called it that it was Mysaria who warned them that Eric was on Dragonstone, though to be fair it's pretty obvious that she did. I like to think however that her saying she wasn't believed at first means, like I guessed, that she had to find Eric first to convince them about his twin being on the island. I got it wrong though about why Mysaria would choose to stay and ask to be part of Rhaenyra's court. It's not because she's changed her mind about not wanting to be powerful and influential, but because she thinks Rhaenyra would make the better ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. Point number 7, I love that Mysaria, already one of my favourite characters, describes Seasmoke the same way I did in my previous video, as lonely. Seasmoke, the lonely dragon. Point number 8, while in the show Rhaenyra asks Rhaena to take her sons Joffrey, Aegon and Viserys to the Eyrie, then to leave Joffrey there and to take Aegon and Viserys to Essos, in Fire and Blood only Joffrey and Rhaena travelled to the Eyrie and stayed there for the rest of the dance, whilst Aegon and Viserys were sent to Essos but travelled via the ship the Gay abandoned. Also, this whole distribution of Rhaenyra's sons wasn't done by their mother but by their brother Jaehaerys, and it didn't actually happen until later in the dance. Point number 9, Daemon, is your armour 100% arrow-proof? Because if not, why don't you have a shield? What would you have done if you turned a corner and found yourself faced with a firing line of soldiers holding bows and arrows or crossbows or something? Point number 10, I wonder what Rhaenyra would have to say if she heard Daemon telling others to also call him Your Grace. Point number 11, unlike in Season 1 Episode 1 when Kristen asked Rhaenyra for her favour, this time he asks Alicent for hers. Fitting since in that same episode, Daemon asked Alicent for hers, and that's who Kristen is now riding out to face. Let's hope Alicent's favour helps Kristen more now than it did for Daemon, since he went on to lose to Kristen in the joust. Point number 12, I love that Rhaenys reminds all these men encouraging war that Rhaenyra wears the crown of her granddad, Jaehaerys the Conciliator, with a synonym for Conciliator being Peacemaker. A king who undid much of the damage done to the Seven Kingdoms by his uncle Maegor the Cruel, and united them as they never had been before by connecting them all via a massive road system. Point number 13, we see that as well as Rhaenyra's sons, Rhaena will also be taking with her 4 dragon eggs, and according to Episode 3 director Geeta Vasant Patel, speaking to Bill and Edwards of Mashable.com, those are Daenerys' eggs. All of us who work on this show are big Game of Thrones fans, so it was very exciting to shoot that scene. So 3 of these dragon eggs are the very same eggs that Daenerys' dragons will hatch from at the end of Season 1 of Game of Thrones, those eggs most likely being the red, green and gold eggs, which Drogon, Rhaegal and Viserion will hatch from respectively. This goes against the popular theory that in 54 AC, a woman called Alyssa Farman, who was the lover of Jaehaerys the Conciliator's sister Rhaena Targaryen, stole 3 dragon's eggs from Dragonstone when her and Rhaena's relationship broke down, fled with them to Essos and sold them to the Sea Lord of Braavos. Since it's been confirmed though that 3 of these 4 dragon eggs are Daenerys's, that explains why Rhaena in the show has been given the additional task of taking Aegon and Viserys to Essos. Most likely she'll also take the eggs with her, thus explaining how they ended up on the continent to then many years later end up being a wedding gift to Daenerys from Illyrio Mopatis. Point number 14, while I think most people will assume Helena saying she forgives Alicent is because of Alicent banging Kristen when Blood and Cheese happened, and is giving Alicent the forgiveness that she wasn't able to get from her dad. I find it a more interesting possibility that Helena is actually forgiving her mother for misinterpreting Viserys' final words, mistaking him saying Aegon is the prince that was promised as him referring to their son Aegon when he was actually talking about Aegon the Conqueror. Viserys mistaking Alicent for Rhaenyra and Alicent mistaking Viserys, which has now led to civil war and unnecessary death on both sides. Mistakes being made and forgiveness being given or not has been a big part of the show so far, and I think mistake would have made a better title for the episode rather than the burning mill. Point number 15, gotta love the idiocy of Aegon to not realise he is being manipulated by a guy who's claiming it's actually others who are manipulating him. First in regards with Otto and now his own mother. Point number 16, I wonder what this moment was all about, with a woman dropping a pouch of money down to a woman who passes it off sneakily to another woman, who we then follow for a short while before switching to following Ulf. Point number 17, and speaking of Ulf, without spoiling anything, just like with Alan, Adam and Hugh, I'll just say Ulf is a major character from Fire and Blood, where he is indeed a dragon seed, though which Targaryens he is related to is never revealed in the book, and just like Hugh, he lives on Dragonstone, not in King's Landing. Point number 18, if you're wondering where you recognise this woman from, it's Diana from Season 1, Episode 8, the woman Aegon graped and Alicent paid off and gave moon tea to make sure she didn't have a bastard child. Point number 19, if you think it would be highly unlikely for Baelor to be able to spot Kristen, Gwaine and the others on the ground from that height, even with their armour glinting in the sun, it seems Moondancer actually spots them first and alerts Baelor she's seen something by making a noise, and Baelor just then simply followed where Moondancer was looking. Point number 20, very interesting that Daemon, a Targaryen, experiences a vision from a weirwood tree. Was it then presumably the old gods who sent him the vision? Also neat that we got to see Millie Alcock again, even briefly. Point number 21, without spoiling anything, just like with Ulf, Alan, Adam and Hugh, I'll just say this mysterious woman at Harrenhal is a major character from Fire and Blood, and I'm not even going to mention her name until the show does. Point number 22, this whole Rhaenyra sneaking into King's Landing disguised as a scepter scenario is a major departure from the source material, as it never happens in Fire and Blood at all. But that's not to say I don't like it. After everything that's happened, it's interesting to see what Alicent and Rhaenyra have to say to each other, how Alicent looks at Rhaenyra as if she's gone mad, how Rhaenyra refuses to surrender because she knows she is the rightful heir, yet still hopes for peace in some fashion, and how Alicent discovers that she mistook what Viserys was saying about Aegon the prince that was promised, and Rhaenyra is reassured her father never did change his mind about her being his heir. Yet still, Alicent refuses to help Rhaenyra insisting the Iron Throne, but also tells Rhaenyra to leave instead of having her captured. It's naive to think of any character in House of the Dragon as being all good or all evil, and it's doubly naive to think Rhaenyra not wanting war means she should just abandon her claim as queen. At this point, no matter the promises made by the Greens that the Blacks will not be harmed if they surrender and bend the knee, Rhaenyra will not consent to living the rest of her life with the possibility that any time Aegon could send another assassin to make sure she never tries to take the throne again. She will not consent to her entire family being imprisoned or kept under constant guard, being permanently separated from their dragons, that Jacaerys would most likely be required to join the Night's Watch and give up any potential claim to the throne, that Joffrey, Aegon and Viserys would need to be made wards, aka prisoners of the Greens to ensure Rhaenyra's continued compliance. But even then, any descendants of Rhaenyra's line would still pose a threat to Aegon's if they ever chose to rise up and claim the Iron Throne for themselves. So the safest thing to do for the Greens to ensure no future civil war could ever happen would just be to end Rhaenyra's line completely, and she most likely knows this and expects as much from Aegon, especially after what Daemon has done to his son. I mean, would Aegon believe Rhaenyra had no part in the murder of Jaehaerys and it was all just Daemon's idea? Would he be content with just having Daemon executed and leaving the rest of Rhaenyra's family alone? Possibly, but then there's still the possibility that he would enact vengeance on her entire family, considering he's perfectly willing to plunge the Seven Kingdoms into war to get it even now. And that's even assuming Daemon would even surrender in the first place, which I highly doubt. He would most likely choose to go down fighting rather than bend the knee and give up the titles and power and dragon he has as Rhaenyra's husband, the Queen's husband. So yeah, essentially at this point, both peace and surrender is impossible for both the Greens and the Blacks based on everything they've done to each other so far. To round all this off, my most disliked part of the episode goes to Daemon walking around Harrenhal with only a sword, no shield, no way to protect himself from any incoming arrows from hidden bowmen. And my most liked part of the episode goes to Rhaenys essentially acting as Rhaenyra's hand, with all of her wise counsel and putting the warmongers of the Black Council in their place. I'm surprised a certain group of morons on the internet haven't chosen to start calling her a man-hating girl boss or some other stupid thing yet. I guess it doesn't play into their narrative that House of the Dragon has to be the thing to currently support, whilst Star Wars The Acolyte has to be the thing to currently hate. Thank you all so much for watching Triple S Breakdowns. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe, give it a like, and why not leave a comment below with your feedback and anything I missed that you noticed. I would love to hear from you all. I've been Triple S, you've all been amazing, and I shall see you all in the next video.